Hello everyone, and welcome to my Scholomance Academy card review. I am joined by Shiro, who is way cuter than Mr. Bigglesworth would ever be. And we are going to be talking about all of the cards from all of the classes and the neutral cards from the upcoming Scholomance Academy expansion. I haven't actually talked about this on YouTube yet, at least, because they've just done such a incredibly fast reveal season this time. Which, frankly, I actually really enjoy. I think that the fact that, we got the initial reveal of the set, and then we started to get cards, and now it's coming out, very, very soon. I think it's a really good pace for reveals, because we don't have the kind of the lull we've had in the past of everyone just kind of waiting to see more for weeks and weeks. So kudos to Blizzard for that, and for what looks to be a super cool set. This is probably the set that I am the most excited about in a very long time. I really like the mechanics. I think that the multi-class stuff is super cool. I think that, Spell Burst is super cool. And I'm super excited to, build all kinds of different decks with all these cards. And so let's get to it. We will start with Demon Hunter. And Shiro's not going to be helping us for the entire review. He's, probably going to go do some important dog stuff, or maybe just sit on the floor. But here you go, buddy. You can get down. All right. First up, Ace Hunter Kreen. So Ace Hunter Kreen, for those who don't know, is a card that was actually made in honor, or at least named in honor, of Hunter Ace, who was the world champion. And Hunter Ace, Ace Hunter, and Kreen specifically is actually a reference to the fact that he always got ice cream after he won events. So regardless, this is one of the first, it's the first card we're looking at, and the first multi-class card that we're looking at. It is both Demon Hunter and Hunter. The way I'm going to do this for the review is talk about them in each section, how that card is potentially valuable to that class specifically. Part of that is, I want to talk about them in the right context. And part of it is, I don't necessarily see the card frames correctly and don't want to screw it up and only talk about it once if it's in two different classes. So, anyway, Ace Hunter Kreen, a 3-cost 2/4. Your other characters are immune while attacking. This card is, I think, very, very powerful. One of the key things here is that this says characters and not minions, right? So this affects your minions, which can just attack into your opponent's minions and not trade, just straight up eat them, and also affects you attacking into your opponent's minions and not taking any damage back. That's especially a big deal for Demon Hunter, which is the class we're talking about right now. It starts first alphabetically. Demon Hunter obviously has a lot of really efficient ways to attack, whether it's with weapons or with Twin Slice. Even if all of those, the weapons and Twin Slice, have gotten nerfed at some point, statistically speaking, this card will get nerfed too because it is a Demon Hunter card. This just gives you the ability to attack into really big minions, which can be a problem. If you're playing Demon Hunter and your opponent has a huge taunt, and you can't just blow it up with your Altruist or Blade Dance or whatever, you can just play Ace Hunter Kreen, throw out a bunch of attack buffs, attack into it, and take no damage back. And not to mention, use your entire board to kill your opponent's entire board and lose absolutely nothing. So this is a card that is at its best when you're ahead, of course, because being able to use your minions on board and kill your opponent's minions with those without having them killed in return is obviously super, super strong. But because it affects your hero as well, it's actually pretty reasonable if you're behind, as long as you have the ability to give your hero a significant amount of attack. Consider this with Warglaives of Azzinoth, right? Warglaives of Azzinoth, the drawback, essentially, is that you take tons of damage attacking into all your opponent's stuff. Well, if you have Ace Hunter Kreen and you have a Warglaive, you can just kill all of your opponent's things and take absolutely zero damage, which Warglaive was already really powerful. That's part of the reason it was one of the Demon Hunter cards that got nerfed. And this just makes it that much more powerful. So I think this card is quite good. 4 health on a 3-drop is not that easy to remove. It's not like a 1/4 or anything, so it's still actually is pretty decent at killing things that attack into it. So I think this card's going to see a lot of play and be very, very powerful in supporting a lot of different Demon Hunter strategies even. Next up, we have Ancient Voidhound, a 9-cost 10/10. The end of your turn, steal 1 health and 1 attack and health from all enemy minions. So my guess as to how this works is that by steal 1 health, 1 attack and health, it means for every minion your opponent has, that gets -1/-1, this gets +1/+1. So if your opponent has, say, 4 guys, 4 1/1s, all their 1/1s are dead, and this is a 14/14. That said, this is a 9 mana card. So at 9 mana, you're really going to need to have something that's going to impact the board pretty significantly. It is a demon in Demon Hunter, so there is the ability to reduce it with Demon Consort. Actually, the name of the card actually escapes me. The 4-mana 4/4 that discounts the next demon you play by 2. You can get this down earlier. You could get this out in like a big demon deck with Pit Commander. You can get it off of the Pit Commander. That is obviously pretty powerful to get another gigantic thing out. That said, if this comes out from the end of turn effect of a Pit Commander, it will not also trigger its own end of turn effect. So if your opponent has a huge board of small minions, this will have to wait till next turn to start humping on them. So my guess is that this is probably not a card that's going to end up seeing that much play. It is another tool in the arsenal of like a big demon deck, but we really haven't seen big demon come together as an archetype that has been particularly effective for Demon Hunter. Part of that is just that Demon Hunter itself is so effective as a tempo/aggro class, and playing a big Demon Hunter style deck ends up really hurting your ability to take advantage of specifically Skull of Gul'dan. Outcast cards really want you to play a deck that has a lot of cheap stuff. A lot of the best things that you can do in Demon Hunter are outcast cards. And having a lot of expensive cards in your deck, or even just a couple expensive cards in your deck, can be really problematic if you're trying to activate any kind of outcast cards. So I think this is a card that's only very narrowly going to see any kind of play in essentially like a Pit Commander, big demon style of deck. And even there, I don't know how good it is because of the interaction between the end of turn trigger for Pit Commander putting into play and this being also an end of turn effect. I think it's obviously really big and really nasty, but unfortunately, big nasty things need to do a whole lot to really justify their existence, so I don't expect this to see much play. Next up, we have Blood Herald, a 5-cost 1/1. Not so hot, but whenever a friendly minion dies while this is in your hand, get +1/+1. So this card is, I think, pretty interesting as a top end for those like theoretical token style Demon Hunter decks. There's, Command the Illidari and the token stuff that never really kind of found a home. Feast of Souls, all that kind of stuff. Is this possibly a good top end for that style of deck to give you, a big threat? I think the biggest problem with this card is the line, while this is in your hand. Obviously, this would be dramatically more powerful if it didn't have to sit in your hand. But the problem is that you really want this to be in like your opening hand to start growing, or at least in your like middle turn hand when you're trading off things. And it's a really bad card to keep in your opener when you need to be sort of assembling your other tools, right? It's also a really bad card to draw when you need to draw something impactful because it's like, a 5-cost 1/1. Oh, this sucks, right? So, I feel like there's a lot of tension here in terms of it being a problematic card to keep in your opening hand, despite being a card that really wants to be kept in your opening hand, and also like a really bad later game draw. It feels like it's going to be difficult for this to really have that big of an impact. It doesn't have rush. It doesn't have charge. It's bad with outcast, right? Again, a lot of the most powerful stuff in Demon Hunter is outcast, much like we were talking about with, the big hungry demon. And if you're playing, a deck that's really gonna be like waiting to play a card like this, well, that's pretty tough to really find a great opportunity to use it if you're trying to move cards around for outcast. So I have a lot of questions about this card. I think that it's probably not powerful enough to justify like being the top end of a deck like that. I feel like you can probably do better. If you're playing like a deck that's like looking to just swarm the board, obviously, swarming the board trading off is different from just swarming the board, but there's already stuff like Sea Giant, right? Like if you're playing like a Command the Illidari deck, yes, you're likely to plan to trade things off, but those things are in play before they trade off. You could likely play something like a Sea Giant, which is, a way better top deck in the late game, things like that. So I'm just not really feeling this as a particularly effective tool in those instances, because you also have to think about the fact that, okay, even if you get the payoff, right? What's the payoff? Is it like an 8/8? Is it a 10/10? Even if it's like a 20/20, you've invested a lot and a lot of time into building this up, and it can just get silenced, right? It can get like earth shocked, it can get executed, it can get just removed by any number of things. Just feels like it's, kind of in a tough spot in that case. So I think that this is a card that is definitely interesting to explore and will give people more incentive to try out those kind of soul token type decks that, were somewhat supported in the initial release of Demon Hunter cards. But I don't really see it as likely to have a huge impact. Next up, we have Cycle of Hatred. This is a 7-cost card. Deal 3 to all minions. Summon a 3/3 spirit for every minion killed. This is, I think, an interesting card. Obviously, this is another possible way that you can play mass removal for Demon Hunter. It's not just like, okay, kill everything. It's like, well, kill a lot of things and get a bunch of stuff. If there is sort of a controlling Demon Hunter deck, this could be pretty good in it. Like, right, the biggest thing about this to me is twofold. One, it is very good in an environment where there are a lot of lackeys, right? Like, lackeys are very popular in both like warrior decks with Livewire Lance and such right now, very popular in rogue decks. There are a lot of kind of like small mid-sized minions, of course, in other Demon Hunter decks. Evaluating the metagame and seeing, okay, well, like, how likely is this to kill the stuff that my opponent's playing? And I think that it actually probably does kill a lot. The problem, of course, being like, is this too slow? 7 is a lot of mana, right? And if we look at like comparable type cards, like Flame Strike has actually been phased out of a lot of mage decks these days, simply because it doesn't do that much for how much you pay for it. This does more in terms of immediately giving you kind of a tempo push on the board with the spirits that you get, but it is worse at killing your opponent's stuff, and obviously damages your own stuff too. It's certainly not strictly better than Flame Strike, because it damages, again, your own things. Deal 3 damage to all minions. And it's also just less damage, so much like Chaos Nova. But, maybe you play a deck that includes Chaos Nova and this to give you more possible board clears. It's one of the things that it's really important to keep in mind. Even if a card that looks like it isn't necessarily like as good as other things, like if you're trying to just kill stuff, right, this is obviously way worse than Chaos Nova. But if you're trying to play a Demon Hunter deck that wants some form of mass removal, well, having the ability to Chaos Nova and Cycle of Hatred may give you a high enough density that you're more likely to have them when you need them. So really important thing to keep in mind. It was kind of like the Purify sort of debacle. So many people like went crazy. They're like, oh, I can't believe they print Purify. Blah 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 blah. It's such a bad card. You already have Silence in this. And it's like, well, when you have Silence and Purify, suddenly you can play a deck that cares about silencing your own stuff. And it was actually a deck that was, powerful enough that it put people into the top 8 of playoffs for, the seasons in which it was legal. I'm not saying that this sort of falls into that same category, except in the sense that, like, there's not really that much mass removal that exists in Demon Hunter right now. This is more of it, and it's more that does it in a powerful way. So maybe if you have enough of this, alongside, like, the ability to attack with a weapon, to kill off other things that might be a little bit too big for the Cycle of Hatred itself to kill, can give you, kind of enough push to maybe have an excuse to play a controlling Demon Hunter deck. That said, I think that, again, controlling Demon Hunter decks and decks with expensive cards like this one, expensive and situational cards, end up really suffering from their inability to effectively use outcast cards. And Skull of Gul'dan just remains just pretty much the best Demon Hunter card. And I think that without the ability to use a lot of those, it's hard to find a way to make, I think, some of these decks work, is at least my impression. Whenever I tried to build sort of slower, more controlling Demon Hunter decks, my Skull of Gul'dan sucked, and it was like, well, now what do I do? Maybe this is, kind of becomes a pseudo win condition on its own. This again, something like Token Druid, right? Like the Spell Druid decks. They make a big board with Glowfly Swarm or Mount Seller, and you're like, okay, well, Cycle of Hatred, now I have a board too. And, that can be an interesting way to kind of counter push while removing your opponent's board. And that alone makes this card appealing to me. The question is whether there's enough cards to support it, and I'm not sure there are. Next up, we have Demon Companion. This, is a Demon Hunter / Hunter split card, much like Ace Hunter Kreen. It is gives you a mini version of any given animal companion. There's a mini Leok, which is a 1/2 with your other minions get +1/+1. There's a mini Misha and a mini Huffer, which is a 2/2 and 2/1 taunt charge, respectively. This card seems pretty good. All of those are pretty efficient. For 1 mana, getting a 2/2 taunt is good. Getting a 2/1 charge is good. 1 mana Leok is really good. +1 attack, not +1/+1, of course. But they just mirror the effects of the animal companions, but smaller. So yeah, I think this is a very strong card in any kind of proactive deck. I could very easily see this seeing play in tempo Demon Hunter type decks. They currently play Blazing Battle Mage, and Misha's better than Blazing Battle Mage. The Huffer version is, in a lot of cases, going to be better than Blazing Battle Mage. And the Leok, in a deck that kind of can go wide with stuff like Satyr Overseer, can end up being extremely effective as well. You're just kind of looking for more good early plays in a lot of those decks, and this can give you any number of them. It is worth noting that the 2-1 version of Huffer is, a little bit problematic against other Demon Hunter decks, but the fact that it gives you, a charge minion that can immediately either go face or trade, and if they attack into it, they're just taking more damage. That's all just very effective, right? That's all really powerful. So I think this is a very good card. I expect to see a great deal of play, and I expect people to complain when their opponents get the perfect companion for the situation, like they always do with Animal Companion, a whole lot. And that just gives people more complaint equity, and that makes it a fantastic card. Next up, we have Double Jump. It's a 1-cost card. Draw an Outcast card from your deck. This is interesting in a couple of levels. One, the fact that it draws an Outcast card from your deck means that, obviously there's a fairly narrow pool of stuff that it could pull from. You could make it so that you could always get, either a Sigil Runner or a Skull of Gul'dan, and it's like, okay, well, this just gives me the ability to cycle through my deck very quickly. The ability to cycle through your deck very quickly is clearly, a major component of what Demon Hunter's class identity has been determined to be. So, this is obviously a little bit less efficient because, yeah, you have to pay the extra 1 in order to hit it, but it puts it directly into position for you to outcast it. So that in itself is really effective. Not only are you searching up, one of a very small pool of cards, so you're guaranteed to find whatever you determined that you were constructing your deck to do in deck building. But, again, putting it directly into outcast position because you draw it immediately and it puts it on the, most recently drawn side of your hand makes this so that it makes it very easy to use a lot of those cards. It's not necessarily a card that you just kind of like fire off at 1 mana, which is one of the things that I think makes it interesting because, say your deck has, like I said, just maybe it has like, Crimson Sigil Runner, I-Beam, and Skull of Gul'dan. If you like play this just like on turn 1 and you hit Skull of Gul'dan, suddenly it's like kind of weirdly, positioned in your hand. And maybe you want to save this until, you have 2 mana. So you can at least get your Crimson Sigil Runner and cycle it down. Or you hit your I-Beam so you can play it, and if you hit the Skull, okay, well now you can reposition. And I really find it interesting how this is going to make you think about when you want to play it, much like, Outcast kind of makes you consider, how you choose to play your cards throughout the game simply because of trying to enable Outcast cards themselves. So I think it's a very good card. I think it will likely see, a decent amount of play. I don't know if it's the sort of thing that you just like automatically slot into Demon Hunter decks because a lot of what they do care about is pure efficiency. But I definitely see it being something that people are definitely going to experiment with in those decks. I don't know if I'll be one of them because I think I still have like 4 games played on Demon Hunter so far. But we'll see. We'll see. It's definitely appealing. Next card we have is Fel Guardians. It's a 7-cost card. It says summon 3 1/2 demons with taunt. Costs 1 less whenever friendly minion dies. This is an interesting card. Like, it's a card you look at and you're like, wait a minute, 7 for 3 1/2 demons? That seems outrageously expensive. And then you're like, hold on. Costs 1 less whenever a friendly minion dies. Part of this, I need to like parse how it actually works. Is this like, okay, it retains this casting cost reduction. Is it for 1 turn? Is it while it's in your hand? It doesn't say while it's in your hand, right? So like maybe this is, you just draw this in the like mid to late game and a bunch of your stuff has died and it's just free. Like if that's true, this is a lot more interesting, right? If you are playing a deck that cares about having minions die, cares about having a bunch of things in play, or whether you're playing like a Blood Herald deck, a Feast of Souls deck or whatever, this inherently is going to have a lot of ways that you're going to be able to enable the discount, and you're also going to get paid off by the small bodies that you get as well. I guess it's not like Blood Herald if it doesn't say in hand, because this doesn't say in hand, right? Whereas Blood Herald does. So this feels like it's a discount that is just retained, period. I want to find out how that actually works, but this is my reading of it because it was revealed like today or whatever, yesterday or something. I think it was today. It's obviously very, very different if it cares, if it is permanently discounted for every friendly minion that's died this game. It's very likely to be very inexpensive by like the middle turns of the game. So a lot of the evaluation of this really does depend on that. And it also kind of depends on how good is that style of deck. I still don't feel like, even with what we've seen from this expansion, that anything in the kind of like token kill your own guys style of deck feels like it outweighs the power of, the like tempo style of Demon Hunter, especially because, again, much like I was talking about with the Blood Herald or the Ancient Voidhound, having these expensive situational cards makes it a lot more difficult to use Outcast. And a lot of the best things in Demon Hunter are Outcast. And you're going to hear me say that a lot. Anytime we look at an expensive Demon Hunter card, be like, well, what are you getting when you're giving up stuff like Skull of Gul'dan? So I think this card is like one of those cards that really depends on how effective that particular archetype is. If that archetype is, has enough support, this is potentially, a solid role player in that, but I don't feel like we're there yet. Next up, we have Philosophy, which is a class taught by Professor Firebat, if you happen to see the reveal video. But anyway, this is I think a pretty interesting card. Copy the lowest cost demon in your hand. Outcast, give both +1/+1. So this is obviously something that wants to be in an aggressive deck with cheap demons, basically like stuff like Battle Fiends. But if you're playing an aggressive deck with cheap demons, how effective is this compared to just like playing other stuff that you could just be aggressive with? And it's kind of like a reload style card, right? It's obviously a very, very marginal one. It's not like a Skull of Gul'dan style card or whatever. So it really, this also kind of depends on like what the cheap demons are. Obviously, Battle Fiends are fantastic to buff with this, but you're also just like, if you're buffing your cheap demons and copying these cheap demons, like you're getting a little bit out of the way of being able to like efficiently play them, because you kind of want to tempo them out. But this gives you, a little bit more like if you're like going over like certain breakpoints of what like damage dealing removal spells can typically handle, this does become like a lot more powerful, right? Especially like think about, again, Battle Fiend. If you Philosophy, play out your Battle Fiend with 3 health is significantly harder for like, a lot of different removal to kill. Obviously, like you can backstab and then hit it, but the opponent having to like attack into it alongside, whatever sort of cheap removal they use is a lot more problematic. It's also interesting that it's just the lowest cost demon in your hand, right? You could use this in a big demon deck if you really wanted to, right? Again, they are harder pressed to use the Outcast effect, but you care a little bit less about the Outcast effect if you're getting the just a copy of another like very high power thing. You're copying like Priestess of Fury, or you're copying Pit Commander or whatever. Sometimes, occasionally, you'll give them both +1/+1. It matters less at that stage. But it's an option, right? So yeah, I think this is an interesting card. It's definitely something that decks that both have cheap demons and have a tendency to run out of resources, I think are more likely to care about than those big demon decks. And I definitely expect people to experiment with this and finding the right demons to play with it. And the right opportunities to play, I think, is a at least fairly interesting place to be. Next up, we have Glide, which, if Reddit tells me anything, is the scariest card in the history of the game. Glide is an interesting card. Cost 4, shuffle your hand into your deck, draw 4 cards. Outcast, your opponent does the same. I posted something on Twitter when some of these cards were revealed, this and another card we'll get to shortly. It is kind of strange to me that Demon Hunter is getting this style of disruption card, because this is obviously the Outcast effect of this is extremely powerful, especially against like combo decks, right? Like combo decks that are trying to assemble particular stuff in their hand. You use Glide with the Outcast effect, and suddenly they like not only lose like their hand, if they have like say 8 cards in hand, they get 4 cards instead of 8, but also like all the things they've been setting up, all gone. It's also like powerful against control decks, right? Who are sitting there holding a really big hand. And the fact that this is going to Demon Hunter, which is a class that is arguably the most efficient, aggressive class in the game, feels strange to me, because we haven't really seen very much disruption of this kind in Hearthstone, period. And having it go to the class that like can already kill the combo decks before they get to the point where they can actually get their combo off is weird, right? Like it feels like this is the sort of thing that you would want to be an option available for like a more controlling class that can't just kill your opponent quite so easily. So that like kind of philosophically putting this in Demon Hunter feels strange to me. I mean, you could argue that, well, like it's less effective because they could just kill them anyway, so you might as well just put it there anyway, because it doesn't really compound the problem of in the same way. But I don't know. It's kind of off-putting to me that there are lots of classes that would have loved to have something to disrupt combo decks in this fashion for years. And here's the new kid in the block who's like, yeah, I've just been killing everyone since the day I was introduced, and also I'm the best against combo with this. It just feels strange to me. But this, I think, pretty clearly wants to go into, an aggressive deck that is going to be using most of its hand, and then, using the at least upfront ability to reload. I doubt you'll see this that much in, necessarily like the style of Demon Hunter decks that we see now, which would have Skull of Gul'dan, unless we're in like a really heavy control/combo environment where you're like, okay, I want Glide and Skull of Gul'dan because I want to have the Skull of Gul'dan like reload, and then I want Glide as additional disruption. Simply because like at one point you just don't want to have that many like kind of expensive card draw type things in your kind of like aggressive tempo style of deck, and B, they obviously kind of conflict with each other because it's harder to outcast your Skull of Gul'dans if it glides in your hand and vice versa. So I do think that the fact that there's a tension between this and the card draw effect, which is currently the best in Demon Hunter, is at least kind of interesting. It's like, do you want to be like just full out aggro and play tons of cheap stuff and glide, play your entire hand glide, or do you want to be a kind of a more mid-rangey tempo style like we've seen with the Skull of Gul'dan decks? That I think is kind of interesting, even ignoring the fact that there's the outcast effect on it. But yeah, the biggest thing that jumps out to this to me is just like, why couldn't I have this in like my priest deck or my like shaman deck or something that like doesn't necessarily just have the ability to kill my opponent before they can set their combo up anyway? I don't know. I do think the card itself is cool. I like the existence of something like this that at least puts the fear in someone's mind that they can't just sit there with and wait and build up their combo all the time because maybe they get glided. I just wish that it wasn't just another thing that Demon Hunter does, because they've been around for just a couple months now, and they can already do everything. Next up, we have Mage Hunter, a close cousin of the Paladin Warrior. It's kind of funny to have a card named Mage Hunter in a set that has like Hunter, Demon, Hunter, Demon Hunter, Hunter, like all these cross-class cards, and this sounds like a cross-class card, but it's not. It's just a card that's named Mage Hunter, because it hunts mages. This is, I just think, a very powerful card, obviously. 3-cost, 2/3 rush. Whenever it attacks a minion, silence it. Obviously super powerful against any kind of buff effect. Very powerful, just kind of as a, like, obviously, like, Owl isn't exactly a superstar. Spellbreaker got rotated to Hall of Fame. Mage Hunter now, is kind of the anti-Edwin, right? It doesn't actually feel like it hunts mages, right? It should be Van Cleef Hunter. This comes in like, oh, you got a 20/20, kill it. Which is the fact that this is also just a 2/3 rush for 3 and could just be, something that can effectively trade with like some of your opponent's early game minions, I think is like quite powerful. Because one of the problems with a lot of silence effects is they just sit in your hand and you're like, well, your opponent doesn't play anything to silence, and it's just like pretty bad. This is a silence effect that can also just remove your opponent's small minions if you're in a matchup where you don't think that you're going to need the silence. Obviously, it's not efficient at doing so, right? It's a 2 attack on a 3-drop, but say your opponent plays, Satyr Overseer, and it's like, all right, kill it. Say your opponent plays like, just whatever, like Blazing Battle Mage, like a Battle Fiend, This can kill a Battle Fiend that's grown huge and still have a bunch of health left because it gets rid of its plus attack. It can kill a questing adventure. It can kill all kinds of stuff and survive. In addition to, just getting you through big taunts or whatever. It's just a very, very good card. Not much else to say about it. I think this is going to see a lot of play. Obviously, the amount of play that it's going to see is somewhat relative to, how much big stuff there is in the metagame for you to silence. But currently, one of the things that Demon Hunter has been vulnerable to has been like just a big thing, right? Like getting out a huge Van Cleef is one of the ways you'd beat Demon Hunter. Getting out like a really big minion was frequently one of your best tools to beat those decks because they didn't have ways to deal with individual big things. And now this is a great way to at least deal with things that their bigness is part of something that can be silenced. So it's sort of another kind of vulnerability of Demon Hunter is getting shored up here. I do think that, just one other thing, I do think that this versus Consume Magic, right? They already have Consume Magic, which is a fantastic silence effect. But the fact that it is just a 2/3 rush body in the instances where you don't care about the silence effect, I think is a kind of a very big deal in sort of comparing the two, right? You can very easily just play 2 Mage Hunters in your deck, and yes, it's like not super efficient at dealing with like opposing minions or whatever, but it gives you access to silence effect when you do need it, and like in a pinch, especially combined with your hero power or combined with like, other sorts of damage you might have on board, it can kill other stuff. So I think is a big reason why I expect this to see quite a bit more play than you saw with Consume Magic. Next up, we have Marrow Slicer, a 4-cost, 4/2 weapon with Battlecry. Shuffle 2 Soul Fragments into your deck. Soul Fragments, in case you were not aware, are a new card type. Well, not card type per se, but new sort of card that is a 0-cost spell that shuffles in your deck, has cast when drawn, restore 2 health to your hero. So it is a shared mechanic between Demon Hunter and Warlock. Sort of more sort of soul magic-y theme, but basically, I like the idea of soul fragments. This is obviously one of the enablers, and then there's payoff cards for soul fragments, in addition to them being zero cost things that you draw and store a little bit of life. I think just the fact that they are things that get shuffled into your deck and then you later draw and they give you a little bit of life back, kind of inherently shows you the idea of the direction of that kind of strategy. It's more of a kind of mid-range controlling sort of strategy that has, wants to spend a little bit more time than these sort of more aggressive tempo style of Demon Hunter decks in game, and then use the various payoff cards to take advantage of them. This is a 4-cost 4/2 weapon. Isn't incredibly efficient. It's fine. It doesn't have the additional impact of a lot of those big weapons that we've seen in the past, like Death's Bite or whatever, at least immediately on the board, but does give you those soul fragments. And, the fact that it is a Demon Hunter weapon does mean that it's easily increased. So being able to attack into larger things, whether 5/5s or even bigger, or using it with stuff like Ace Hunter Kreen, right, to attack into really big things alongside those buffs to sort of give you more ability to use your weapons to keep yourself alive in order to get to sort of your payoff points of the soul fragments. And let's take a look at those. Ta-da! Shard Shatter Mystic. A 3-cost 3/2, meh, but Battlecry, destroy a soul fragment in your deck to deal 3 damage to all other minions. That's a pretty big payoff. If you're playing a deck that is looking to utilize soul fragments, this is obviously something that is pretty appealing, right? Obviously, this is most powerful when there are a number of smaller minions in play. Maybe the Marrow Slicer itself is not necessarily going to come down in time for you to get an efficient use of Soul Shatter Mystic. Worth noting that the nature of these soul fragments being things that are shuffled into your deck, and that if you draw them, you gain your life and you go buy them, you have a limited window, right, in order to actually utilize your cards that do use your soul fragments. And you have to kind of manage the soul fragments you have left in your deck with your payoff cards like the Soul Shatter Mystic, or Shard Shatter Mystic rather, in order to make sure that you can't just like sit and wait forever in order to use this for the perfect time. So this, if in an aggressive matchup, if you get a soul fragment in your deck early and then you Shard Shatter Mystic and blow up all your opponent's stuff with this, obviously super powerful. But if you're playing in a matchup where, say, your opponent's playing Spell Druid, right? If your opponent's playing Spell Druid, maybe you shuffle some soul fragments in your deck and they're like, all right, I'm going to wait until you draw those before I like really go in on a board in order to prevent you from being able to effectively use this Shard Shatter Mystic. So it's possible in some matchups that you're going to want to be like, okay, I got to keep something that gives me soul fragments in my hand in order to make sure I have the opportunity to use my payoff cards after the fact, because my opponent's going to play around them and things like that. So I think it creates kind of an interesting dynamic. I think this card is pretty clearly very powerful. Obviously, a body attached to deal 3 damage to all their minions is extremely powerful for 3 mana. And I do think that this is something that starts to get me excited about some other type of Demon Hunter deck, as opposed to the tempo ones, right? That just want to go burn through their deck and go super aggro. Like this card and the Soul Fragments are the direction in this set that I've seen so far. Well, I've seen all the cards that I have seen that makes me think, ooh, maybe I want to try and go in another direction than we've seen so far with Demon Hunter. So I'm excited about this card and the Soul Fragment mechanic in general, which we're going to see more of right now. Next one is Sociologist Malicia. Get it? It's like a sociologist, except she deals with souls. 7-cost 5/5. For each soul fragment in your deck, summon a 3/3 soul with Rush. So, unlike the Shard Shatter Mystic, this doesn't consume them. This just gives you a payoff for each one that you have, which I think is obviously another thing that's kind of like, okay, well, how do I balance I want to play this at the right time and try and play around my opponent's mass removal that they have available with, okay, I want to maximize the immediate power I get from this. The fact that your soul fragments have Rush definitely means that, this is more of a reactive card, but it can also, in a matchup against a controlling deck, this can just be, all right, 7 mana, boom, I have a board full of stuff. So I think this card is pretty clearly very powerful. And again, I really like the dynamic of having the management of this resource that you put into your deck and want to kind of get to in some sense, because, well, you gain life, for certain matchups, you want to like dig to them because you want to, get the life gain, get a little bit of your health back. And in others, you're like, okay, I want to maximize the value that I get out of each of these in my deck from something like Sociologist. So very cool card. And this one I think is pretty obviously like the big payoff power card, and can pretty clearly swing the board massively. The fact that, again, they have Rush means that even if you're really far behind, say you have like 5 Soul Fragments in your deck, suddenly, boom, clear off like your entire board. Seems great. Next up, we have another Soul Fragment card, Soul Shard Lapidiary, or Lapidiary. I want to say Lapidiary, I don't know why. Lapidiary. Battlecry, 5 cost 5/5, destroy a Soul Fragment in your deck to give your hero +5 attack this turn. This card I'm less excited about. Obviously, this can be an aggressive way to use the Soul Shard, your Soul Fragments. You play this, smash your opponent in the face. It kind of feels like the other tools are a bit more controlling. So this feels like it may fit a little bit less. But again, if it is kind of a mid-range style, having a card like this that can put a lot of pressure on your opponent in control matchups, this is effectively a 5/5 that just hits your opponent for 5. Or helps you control the board, killing some of your opponent's minions. This is a huge tempo swing. If you're using it to kill your opponent's minion, pretty big burst of damage. Obviously less effective, if you are, say fighting against like a bunch of small minions or whatever, compared to, of course, the Shatter Mystic. But having kind of a variety of tools from the Soul Fragments can obviously give you different direction to go with your Soul Fragment decks and different ways to play even the same Soul Fragment deck. So this card, my initial take in terms of like, okay, I'm looking to play, a kind of more controlling deck. This feels like it doesn't necessarily have as much of an immediate home there. But on the other hand, again, using this just as a tempo play to wipe out your opponent's like mid-range minion, I think is extremely powerful. So definitely feels like it has a place there. And also, of course, the ability to go aggressive against combo decks and control decks. 5 damage is just a lot to just kind of get as an additional battle cry from a 5 cost 5/5. So I do feel like if this Soul Fragment deck is a thing, and again, I feel like this is the new mechanic for Demon Hunter that excites me. I feel like this is going to be a card that does see significant play in those decks. Next up, we have Soul Shear, a 2-cost, deal 3 damage to a minion, shuffle 2 Soul Fragments in your deck. Yeah, I mean, 3 damage is generally decent damage to a minion for 2. We see, like Dark Bomb, Frostbolt. Obviously, the ability to go face is a big part of those, but this has the additional value of the Soul Fragments in your deck, which obviously are multi-purpose, both the additional future healing and enabling all of these things. Just feels like it's going to be a staple card in those decks as a inexpensive removal effect that enables the rest of your stuff. Pretty powerful tool alongside the Shatter Mystic to enable that against an aggressive deck. Make sure you have that on time. As well as, of course, just, the rest of it. It feels like, in particular, Shatter Mystic feels like the most powerful of the payoffs. Obviously, I mean, we're talking about like a handful of cards, right? But Shatter Mystic against aggressive decks is incredibly powerful and something you really want to be able to enable early. So the cheap ways to get Soul Fragments to your deck feel very important in those matchups. It's also sort of an interesting thing playing against that deck, right? Say you're playing against someone who's playing a Soul Fragment deck and they remove something with Soul Shear on turn 2. It's like, how much do you go in on turn 3? And the fact that you have to use a removal spell to set up a mass removal spell is kind of weird, because it's like usually you might want to like absorb a little bit more damage. So does that help conceal the fact that you have the mass removal effect? I don't know. It's kind of interesting. So I'm definitely excited to try it out, and probably, again, one of the few things that'll get me to try to actually play Demon Hunter these days. And here's the next cheap enabler, Spirit Jailer. One thing that I've noticed about this set in general, this is obviously the first of these that we've seen, is that there's quite a few just 1/3s for 1. 1/3s for 1 for a while were like not that common. There were a few of them in a couple classes, and then eventually there was like Dire Mole, and now there's just like 1/3s for 1 like kind of all over, and a particular number of high quality 1/3s for 1 in this set. This one, Spirit Jailer, this 1/3 for 1 can help defend you against a lot of early minions, a lot better than any of the a lot of the other small minions against Demon Hunter itself, because it's a lot harder for them to kill. The fact that it is a cheap way to get the Soul Fragments in your deck, again, can enable all those things, the Soul Shatter Mystic or Shard Shatter Mystic, etc., etc., etc. Also, this is you know, possibly a very good thing to buff with Philosophy, right? As a 1/3 demon, the fact that it is a demon, you can possibly play Philosophy in a deck with this. You know, the other cards that work with the Soul Fragments are not demons, but maybe there's other demons that deck wants to play. So you can, like, you know, copy it and get additional extra Soul Fragments into your deck that you wouldn't necessarily otherwise just playing the cards naturally. And being a 1/3, it uses the +1/+1 very well. You know, 2/4. Having that extra health to help make that attack more relevant because it's harder to kill can be a very big deal. So also this dude just looks like depressed. His soul is in jail. He's just sitting there like, is that like a register? I don't really know what he's doing, but he's got a depressing life. And you take apparently his soul, the fragments of his soul, and you shuffle them in your deck, and he just stares like dead-eyed into the distance as he rings up someone else. Obviously going to be a core card for those Soul Fragment decks. Next up, we have Star Student Stellina. 4-cost, 4/3 with Outcast. Look at 3 cards in your opponent's hand, shuffle one of them into their deck. This was the other card that kind of got me thinking about, you know, these mechanics existing in Demon Hunter. This is a very powerful disruptive card. Right, like if you're playing as combo, you're playing as control. You know, this is very, very effective at helping you pick apart your opponent's game plan. Obviously, it's more effective against decks that require like multiple particular key cards. It itself is like pretty inefficient. A 4-cost 4/3 is pretty weak. But if you are playing a deck that, you know, is going to struggle to deal with, you know, a combo deck, or, you know, you're looking to pick apart specific answers your opponent has to your proactive strategy in a control deck, this can be quite powerful. Again, the fact that it's Outcast makes this a little bit weird. This and Glide are both Outcast effects for disruption, which, again, if you're playing Demon Hunter, you have access to a lot of really powerful aggressive tools that can give you ways to beat combo and controlling style decks. And if you're playing like a control deck or like a mid-range deck, this is a lot harder to outcast. So it feels like a strange place for both of these. It feels like they both want to kind of go into the decks that are already good against the things that their effects are good against. But yeah, maybe this is a card that you play in kind of like your mid-range-ish Soul Fragment deck or like Dude deck, you know, like Sacrifice style deck, in order to that isn't necessarily that aggressive, in order to pick apart, you know, combo decks or whatever. But yeah, I just feel like that kind of design philosophy of putting these into the class that already beats people up really efficiently, that, you know, naturally going to be good against combo, is a little bit strange to me. I'm not really sure if this will have a home for that reason. Next up, we have True Aim Crescent, a 1-cost 1/4 weapon. After your hero attacks a minion, your minions attack it too. This is a weird card. Like a 1-cost 1/4, this is basically a Light's Justice, right? But you can just pile on. This feels like it wants to go with things that have attack triggers, right? Like if you have something that like has an attack trigger, you could attack with that thing that has an attack trigger, and then attack with this, and then get the attack triggers again. This is obviously like insane with like Kreen, right? Ace Hunter Kreen that makes you and all your guys immune. You know, you can like pile on with the True Aim Crescent to like kill things and just like shove them all at one thing and have your guys not die. That I think is very very effective. But by itself, it feels like it wants to go with attack trigger minions, because you know, yes, you can like attack all your stuff at your opponent's face, and then use this, attack something, and then your minions start attacking it. I'm curious how this works. Like, if there's an order to how the minions attack. Well, there obviously is an order, but like, if the minion dies to the first minion that attacks, do the other minions still attack? Like, how's it gonna work, right? That's kind of part of my question. Is it like do your guys attack from left to right? Do they attack in order played? You know, I'm just kind of curious, like, how this will end up resolving, because that's obviously important to playing it, but it's also kind of important to evaluating it, because if your guys just keep attacking into something that's already dead, it makes like attack triggers on your guys much more powerful alongside this. So yeah, I think this is a very interesting card that kind of makes people reevaluate stuff like minions with attack triggers, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, again, goes super well with Ace Hunter Kreen, and especially if you add all that together, Ace Hunter Kreen plus things that have attack triggers, and suddenly you're just kind of snowballing like crazy. So I'm very curious to explore this card, as well as to figure out how it works. And we've actually made it to the final Demon Hunter card. There's a lot of Demon Hunter cards in this expansion. There's more Demon Hunter cards than anything but neutrals. Just kind of the way that the design works for this year. There are going to be additional Demon Hunter cards in all the expansions. And last, and I think pretty much least, Violfined Trainer. 4-cost 5/4, Outcast, summon 2 1/1 demons. I will like to give this a decisive meh. Yeah, I mean, this is just it's decent stats, right? Like if you do outcast this, you get a 5/4 plus 2 1/1s. But like it doesn't do anything immediately on the board. Feels like it's kind of a card that's you know, an arena filler, which is pretty much like the first thing that we've gotten like that for Demon Hunter. Maybe this is something that wants to go into, you know, a Feast of Souls type deck. You know, a deck that's looking to be like basically token Demon Hunter. This could have a home there, but yeah, I feel like this is most likely, you know, just not really a card that's going to see too much play. It is, you know, certainly a card that, you know, if you were guaranteed the outcast, would be quite powerful. But in those sort of token style strategies, I feel like there's going to be a lot of cards like Feast of Souls, you know, whatever, that you're going to want to hold for specific situations, which makes it a lot harder to outcast things compared to, you know, the more proactive, less synergistic, or less synergy reliant, kind of tempo aggro style Demon Hunter decks. So I don't really feel like this card is likely to see that much play, and I feel like that's like the first time I've been able to say that definitively about any Demon Hunter card. It feels like, you know, which is weird because like most classes you're like, all right, yeah, this is kind of a filler type card for this class. This is, I think, we got to the absolute last card alphabetically in the second expansion that Demon Hunters existed before I felt like I could say that about Demon Hunter. So here it is, your Demon Hunter filler.